As Nada said, this is Predan Černe Oven, my name is Predan, and we are very pleased to welcome you all at the event, which again brings to the fore service and information design. For all of you who find this rather new, we would like at the very beginning set the facts straight and show you a short and selected chronology of service and information design in Slovenia. As you can see already in 2010, there was a first exhibition on service information design, also together with a book with the same title. In 2012, the first global service champion, Ljubljana, and so on. So today's event is therefore far from the first, but it is our wish to make a shift from talking and defining what it is all about, to opening up the field of action towards recognizing each other as partners, in a dialogue and as potential collaborators. In our opinion, we need to finally recognize designer as the one who can competently intervene in the field of improving public transport, in the field of dealing with frustrated passengers waiting at the airport, or, for example, can help to improve hygiene standards in laboratories.
So why are such projects so important, and why are service and information design worth our attention? This is a design where the interdisciplinary approach includes translating complex systems into easily understandable and useful services and information. With the incorporation of design to the services, we are creating benefit for the end user as well as to the other stakeholders in the implementation of services, be it private company or public administration. It is necessary to emphasize at this point that service and information design are two different areas of design. However, in the process of research, we found excellent projects connecting both disciplines. We first integrated them in the aforementioned book in the exhibition of 2010, as we recognize the power of combining the two for potential achievement of better solutions for identified problems. In other words, service and information design compel us to constantly ask about our approach as well as working methods. What if there is not enough merely to increase the font size in the electricity bill paid by the 85 years old lady who lives alone and is slowly showing its early signs of dementia? What if there is not enough just to design a new seat for the city bus? Maybe we first have to ask about the nature of the product, particularly why and how we design it and how it is used. And we think this is not just a seat, but the public bus as such. What if Slovenia medical card, basically a carrier of information about your health insurance at the moment, could actually be our direct contact with your doctor and with your health in particular?
We believe that it is necessary to stress that both fields are increasingly gaining importance in recent years, of course, thanks to the tangible numbers. As Pekinpah wrote, services now represents between 60 and 70% of the gross domestic product of developed countries. But if we are more accurate, and if we are to believe the records from CIA or Facebook, the number is getting closer to 80%.
But in Slovenia, despite all the numbers, we stress that service design is still left with spontaneous, unconscious planning. This applies to services as well as designers. This fact brings us to the initial argument that we do not recognize each other as potential collaborators, and that designers do not recognize services as a field in which they could actually work. So where is that misunderstanding? Could it be the intangible nature of the service itself?
So, if we venture into the field of intangible, we soon find out that this is nothing new to design. Already Hannes Meyer, the second director of the Bauhaus, in his program entitled Building in 1928, before building a house, we have to examine the motives. We have to examine sex life, sleeping habits, pets, gardening, and so on. He also continued, we also have to examine the daily routine of everyone who lives in the house, and this gives us the functional diagram for the father, for the mother, and all the other occupants. We have to explore the relationships of the house and its occupants to the outside world. Postman, passerby, visitor, and so on. He goes on, we also explore the relationships of human beings and animals, even the interrelationships between human beings and domestic insects. Anyhow, by changing our perspective according to Meyer, the role of the architect and designer drastically changes. Before, he was an artist, and now he becomes a specialist in organization.
For the beginning of the 20th century, we find similar examples from Meyer thinking. The idea that the designer is in the first place somebody with actually appreciates the contents. One of the best examples is certainly the process developed at the Institute of Vienna, where Maria Neurath actually regarded designer as a transformer. Transformer was the person who made the visual statement and the crucial intermediary between those with specialist knowledge, those who assembled the final product, and, in some respect, the most important element, the public. The transformer is the trustee of the public. It was not about just any facts, but information worth presenting. It was not about the simple method of turning numbers into fancy pictorial statistics, but about displaying information as intelligent visual statements. And transformation of data into information is exactly what is needed in our confused and complex society today.
So what's the point? With the process of data collection, we open up the possibility of defining and identifying the real problem. And with the next step of design services, we can therefore avoid solving problems which are not. Or, as Norman Potter once wrote, the case for analytical technique of the simplest order rests on the premise that you should find out what you're doing or what you should be doing before considering how to do it. Or, as Tony Bright defines it in a similar way, before we attempt to do any kind of design, we must answer to the following questions. What is the nature of the service? Why do we use it? And how do we use it?
Of course, in order to get the answers we are looking for, it is necessary first to define the role of the designer in the process. It is central and complex. On the one hand, he or she must put on the same glasses which every of the stakeholders in the service uses. On the other hand, he or she should actually be able to take a step back and look at the service as a whole. During the work, a designer must constantly seek a balance between empathic understanding for each stakeholder in the context of the whole service. If we imagine other stakeholders and different professionals that are part of the service as verticals, the job of the service designer is to be responsible for the horizontal integration of all the people involved. Charles Eames defined the role of the empathy with this example. The role of the designer is that of a very good, thoughtful host anticipating the needs of his guests.
To sum it all up, as we said at the beginning, it is our intention to open up the field of communication. Already in the 70s, Victor Papanek wrote, "What is missing is the creation of social involvement. Designers solve only a small proportion of issues instead of focusing on solving real problems that surround us. To do that effectively, we must define our collaborators. Lack of communication, of course, applies to both sides. Why are we stressing this? When we try to define challenges where design intervention could improve the current situation, we were often faced with the question, or maybe to describe it more graphically, we were often faced with bewildered faces saying, what does design have to do with it? Or, it is true that we recognize that as a problem, but the designer would be the last person we would think of calling to help us with that. As a result, we find it even more urgent that we are entering all these spaces with research initiative with the aim to expand the involvement of the designer in diverse areas. The same aim was used in the project we did with our students. They worked on projects like the Dementia Project. Using service and information design methods, they developed a set of social games for elderly people suffering from dementia. Then the other project was the Medical Card Project, where the aim was to design improved utilization of health insurance card, or public transport project. Students work on the topic, how to change our mostly negative perception of the city bus.
With that kind of project, we would like to emphasize actually that we need to enlarge our area of operation. Expand the field, or as Ken Garland nicely put it ages ago, why at the time when communication systems of all kinds are increasing in scope and complexity, we should feel bound by any narrow definition of the scope of graphic design? I don't know, but this is wrong. It is therefore necessary to define and redesign the relationship between designer and client. Firstly, we need designers who will follow Hans Meyer, therefore actively intervene in the organization of our lives. And secondly, and this is in the hands of policymakers and clients, it is time that they recognize us as possible, as those who are able to tackle the most demanding projects in order to meet the needs of the end users, as well as those who provide services. The objectives are, of course, higher quality of life, better performance, and better economy. The answer to the first challenge is service and information design, obviously. The answer to the second one lies in cooperation, conversation, and especially co-creation. as we all know that good teamwork makes magic.
To prove it also with numbers. A recent Swedish survey shows that most important sources for new ideas and service companies are employees and customers. Almost 50% of the new ideas stem from interaction with users, whereas external research only accounts for about 3%. Despite all these figures, we are fully aware that it is in human nature that no one accepts the change right away. Changes tend to hurt, and discipline is needed to implement them. The power to perceive them as a qualitative leap and investment in the long run is rare. But exactly that is the role of design, to transform. And with this daring advice of designers, we conclude our 10 minutes. Do not accept a label or a slot on a production line. Be a complete human being with moral and intellectual integrity and thoroughgoing technical competence. Be a transformer. Before we end, we would, however, like to show you also a short movie, conceived by, we could also call them pioneers of service design, Charles and Ray Eames. And really bear in mind, as Otto Neuland once said, to remember, simplified pictures is better than to forget accurate figures. So the movie that you will see, it's written and directed by Charles and Ray Eames. It's entitled The Expanding Airport. It's a study of services and convenience for Washington International Airport, and the movie was filmed in 1958, with the emphasis on the year.
The image that we have when we think of passenger convenience is not at all an unattractive one. It is an image of high-performance equipment. Equipment which might well rebel if required to provide passenger convenience where it's really needed. The grand total of walking done by passengers inside the 10 major airports in 1958 would equal 100 trips across the country, plus 20 walks around the world, plus 4.5 round-trip treks to the moon. If there exists an average passenger of the 48 million that will enplane this year, he will walk from his parked car about 650 feet to the ticketing counter, and from the ticketing counter about 950 feet to the aircraft. This adds up to about 5 times the length of a football field. It also approximates the distance covered by the average interchange passenger. But this is nothing compared to the opportunities for a stroll that will be offered by some of the larger terminals now under consideration. Necessary spreading of facilities to accommodate equipment has given the old hikes new dimensions. Up and down ramps, along corridors, in and out of doors, and loaded with hand luggage. Walks, which were once filled with romantic anticipation of adventure, will become more and more irritating as the high-speed flights come into service. These distances, these walks, how did they get this way? In the beginning, both the equipment and the facilities were at the human scale. There was a close relationship between the aircraft, the public, and the offices. Then offices grew towers, and aprons developed gates. Gates were pushed out to become fingers. Fingers became enclosed and multiplied. Within this same general framework, we find representative airports like Philadelphia, St. Louis, Dallas, Washington, and Detroit. Now, fingers are developing departure lounges. Space requirements of jets are increasing gate distances. jets have also brought the telescoping gangplank. As additional fingers become necessary, the sub-terminal develops. A unit terminal plan begins to surround the parking, and we find the airport surrounding the terminal. It is this spread-out form that the Washington International Airport is apt to take if treated as a decentralized finger system. This port of entry to the nation's capital will be the first airport in the world developed from the beginning to accommodate a high percentage of jets. In scale, it becomes a new kind of beast. The present national airport could fit in the infield. Compare it with the city of Washington itself. The distance from the Capitol down the Mall, beyond the Washington Monument, and past the reflecting pool is the length of one runway. This is also the total length of the buildings and fingers in the terminal alone, 2 miles. But along with the dramatic change in size come other factors which make the finger system seem impractical for jet planning. The bewildering maze of buildings and passages, the serious problems of fumes and noise and glass, the handling of service equipment, and a desperate need for flexibility and latitude. All these factors suggest removing the aircraft from the terminal or any of its extensions and grouping the planes around special service blocks which will be fed from underground. What is now required is that some part of the terminal building be able to detach itself and move out to the aircraft. It would seem that this might best be the departure lounge itself. The same lounge which developed as a swelling on the fingers and which can now be removed from the 8,000 feet of fingers and formed into a compact and accessible group. By this move, 11,000 lineal feet of building are reduced to a structure approximately 1,000 feet long. The gates are now in a row, grouped according to the airlines they serve. The posted time may be the time the lounge closes. It would open perhaps 15 minutes earlier. Passengers enter through ample doors, make themselves comfortable. There's plenty of room for hand luggage. The checked baggage has been taken and the ticketing done just inside the entrance. The gate to the departure lounge lies just beyond. The early arrival can spend time and money in the concessions, right up until the last minute. As the lounge moves from terminal to aircraft, the passengers find themselves in a spacious room, isolated from fumes and noise. And those interested in operations can sit forward in the observation section. Once freed from the building, the departure lounge can move anywhere. Originating flights can even be boarded at the hangar, from which the aircraft can move directly to the takeoff runway. In the lounge, the passenger has started his trip and can be ferried to the aircraft wherever it is most convenient from an operations standpoint. Through flights will be grouped around the centralized operation units, which are easily accessible to the runways, and from which the planes will receive fuel and other services. The larger planes will be fed by pairs of lounges, reducing transfer time to a minimum. The approach is made under controlled conditions. The pneumatic contact unit moves out and forms a sealed passage. Doors of lounge and plane are opened, and the transfer effected. The mobile lounge will perhaps be best known for its convenience and its feeling of luxury. But a very substantial part of its value will come from the freedom and flexibility it gives to airport planning. In the evolution of these operations, there is a high probability that something like the mobile lounge will be servicing quite a few of the conveyances that are yet to come along.